I would like to share with you some things that I have learned over my recent trials, but I would also like to argue that we all have trials in various forms and fashion. And so what one person might seem to have a very extreme set of circumstances is really quite relative to the person. So if we take a look at sort of my recent past 6 years, my husband has been hit very hard with an illness, and we have had these ups and downs, these peaks and valleys, these mountains and lows, but so does everybody. It might be quite different, but everybody's trajectory in life looks something like this. And what I would want to sort of convey to you today has to do with this idea of how you view these events and what you choose to do with these events. Recently, I was having lunch with some friends, and ironically, this was my fortune. I kid you not. I opened it up. It said, "Much can be seen if only you look." How true is that? And it occurred to me that so often we're running. We're scheduled. I have little kids. There's always something to do. There's a party. There's this, there's work. We're so busy that very, very rarely do we pause. Do we think? Do we contemplate? And we're missing out on a lot. So, for example, there are signs all over the place, right? Ad nauseum, signs, billboards, people. But they're gifts if you pause and reflect upon the information that they're conveying to you. I saw this billboard, "Believe." It turns out that's one of my mantras in life. It was fabulous. I saw it on a day I needed it so much. There are people that will tell you things and you think, gosh, I was just thinking about that. That's so strange. Who are you? What is your name? Again, if you do not pause and reflect upon this gift that they're giving you, you're missing out. I would also like to argue that if you receive some kind of information and put it under the umbrella of gratitude, you will get much more bang for your buck, so to speak. I'd like to sort of use this as an illustration. This is not my photograph. I wish I could take photographs like this. But this does look like something that I saw recently. So this was back in February when we had one of those storms. The ice, it actually took me 3 hours to get home from work that day. And I called up our night nurse. Jim now needs 24/7 care. And I called up our night nurse. I said, "Don't even try to come. It's crazy. Stay home." And she was very concerned about me and concerned about Jim. "Oh, I can try to get there." No. Don't worry. We'll take care of it. And I think maybe this might be why Jim was a little bit anxious that night, because it was just me. But he needed a lot of attention this particular night. So I was trying to rest on the couch just down the hall from his room. And he has a bell that he would click when he needed some help. And it seemed like every hour he was clicking that bell. And I thought, oh my goodness, I'm so tired. And I would walk to his room and I would see this gigantic, brilliant moon. I've always liked the moon. I don't know how you could not like the moon. It's absolutely beautiful, right? We all know how precious this object is, what it does for our planet. But just if you look at it, cool, right? You can see craters, you can see all this neat stuff. And again, every hour on the hour, I'd walk from the couch to the room and I'd help Jim. And one of those times, I stopped and I really looked at the moon. And what I saw was the moon, but I also saw all the details. So I saw the perfect snow that was on the ground. There were no footprints. There were no animal prints spoiling it. There was no smog, no pollution, no exhaust tainting the whiteness. I saw in the trees the snow on the branches, and there was a slight wind, and it would just sort of shimmer. And I could see little patterns on the snow because the moon was so bright. It was a full moon, and it lit up everything. It was as if a 100-watt bulb was on. It was fantastic. And what I saw was not only beautiful, I saw powerful, I saw predictable, I saw constant. And it reminded me, again, only because I paused to think about it, that there are so many things that are constant in our life, even when you're in the middle of chaos, even when you're in the middle of tragedy. There's something that's always there that's constant. And it's different for everybody, but it is important, again, to remember that. So here's Thoreau with one of my favorite quotes. It's not what you look at that matters, it's what you see. Again, this reminder that you need to pause and reflect, and you need to do so with gratitude. Thank you, Moon, for reminding me that there's constantness in this kind of crazy world right now. And this kind of brings me to my second point, is how you choose to view things and what you decide to do with that allows you to write your own story, not somebody else. So an event happens, and the event in and of itself is an event. The event becomes bad, awful, fantastic, only when you give that event that power. Now, I would never try to say that an event, especially a hardship, is an opportunity. I have heard people say that. I think that is beyond insensitive. And I would also sort of argue that some events are bad. There's no way around it. Bad things happen. Things don't happen for a reason sometimes. Sometimes bad things happen. However, if we think about these events, they're just events. I came across this as I was doing some research and reading something the other month, and I thought, are you kidding me? This seems so absurd to me. How can something be an ordinary hardship and then an extreme hardship? I mean, a hardship is a hardship, right? Again, it's just what you decide to do with it. So I think that's silly. Regardless of what the event is, what is the stress, what is the adversity, what is the hardship, there's the logical starting point of why. Why did this happen to my husband? Why is life not fair? Why won't my kids have a father they deserve? Why? You know, we could continue this. And certainly this is important, but if you stay in that situation, it's a problem, right? You're not going to have a very joyful life. People who tend to do well with such events will move into the what category. So, okay, the event happened. What can I do with it? What good can I make of it? What positives can I draw from this? Again, it's my story. I get to write it. And so this idea of movement and getting over the hump and switching into the what category is really the heart of resilience. And so I would argue that the movement is resilience, and this is what matters. I love this from the Department of Homeland Security. I thought it really kind of captured the fact that these hardships can be huge, as they're implying, right, with tornadoes and hurricanes. But again, it's relative. A hardship to one of my students in college might be that their long-term relationship with their boyfriend has ended. That's a serious issue, right? So again, it is all relative. But in general, the idea of resilience is to bounce back, and I like this idea of the courage to do it. Again, taking control of your own story. So I'm a biologist by training, got into this resiliency area by default. But here are some germinating seeds. And as hopefully you all know, seeds can remain viable, scientists thought, for 100, 150 years. If you put them in the soil and they have the right conditions, like the right soil temperature, moisture, they're going to germinate. And there was a report out by the U.S. Forestry Service that some Japanese scientists found some water lotus seeds in some peat that they knew was really, really old. So they did their first sort of criteria to determine whether or not the seeds were viable. They planted them, right, to see if they would germinate. Sure enough, they did. Okay, they're viable. Then they did the radiocarbon dating, and they found out that these seeds were anywhere between 830 years old and over 1,200 years old. That's fantastic. And to me, this is the representation of resiliency that is embedded in all of us. Some of us, by default, switch into resiliency gear early in life. We grow that trait. We all have it. It's part of our human spirit. But some of us, that resiliency has been dormant. And it just needs to be treated and fostered and brought out. And the reason I believe that you need to do this is because resiliency is absolutely the key to being joyful. I also want you to notice I didn't say happy. I said joyful. Being joyful is something that is ingrained, it's deep, it's part of you. You can pull it out when you need it. It is constant, just like that moon. If we think about happiness, the word itself is based upon happenings, events. Events come and go. If you're going to base your life sort of feeling on happenings, again, you're going to be in a very sad state. You're going to be happy for a very brief period of time, and then that event's over, and then you need something else, and then that event's over. So again, resiliency is based upon this concept of using it to be joyful, to find the joy in your life regardless of your circumstances. So a few ideas of becoming more resilient. The first two I've already mentioned. Think about things in a maybe slightly different way, or at least pause to think about things. And think about what is the perspective you're gaining from that. Also consider saying out loud your gratitude or writing it. Much, much power in writing things down. It's like it reinforces what you might be thinking. And if something bad happens, like your brain starts going down a dark path, as I call it, stop it, right? So literally stop it. So if Prince William can shake it off, so can you. And actually, I chose that picture because that was one of the first things that I did. When I would start feeling really negative about something, I would do this. And I'm positive my colleagues at work thought I was insane because I would be going down the hall like this. But it was just something that would snap me out of it, right? I also would just kind of do this. Other people just kind of physically slap themselves. Again, the idea is for you to snap out of it and not allow yourself to go down that dark pathway. Another idea is to develop a long-range view. So rather than focusing on that awful fight that you had with your spouse or that really negative lab report that you got back from the physician, to look at things from a distance and think about what has my health been doing over the past 6 months? You know, what is my attitude and how can I potentially get out of this hump? And then, I mentioned before, get yourself a mantra if you don't already have one, and think about it and plaster it wherever you need it. I have the word believe in various places in my house and at my office. And again, it just makes me feel good. Every once in a while I'll start, and then, powerful, believe. Okay, I want to end with a poem by Robert Frost. And most of us know his very famous poem by The Road Less Traveled. It turns out, and I'm sure many of you guys know, that is not the name of the poem. The name of the poem is The Road Not Taken. And if you think about the title of that poem, it implies that the person who has this decision between these two paths in life decides to write his own story. He decides to go down one path to make the most of it. That was my decision. I'm going to go with it. So the start of the poem is that two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both, and be one traveler long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. The poem continues, and basically it says, both of these paths were equally worn, both of these paths looked equally good, but he had to make a decision. So he makes his decision, and the poem ends, I shall be telling this with a sigh. So he's reflecting. I know years from now, I'm going to look back and I'm going to, kind of be disappointed that I couldn't go on both. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. And so I would just argue with this, that the sigh that he speaks of is the key. Again, the implication is he wished that he could do both. They both looked lovely. There's no right path, but he had to choose one. And that's the real key. He chose one. You need to choose one and be joyful in it, right? This is what I've decided to do. I'm writing my own story, and I'm going to draw on my inner strength to make the most of it in a joyful way. So thank you.